Yesterday, I was at a party at my son's school, and my daughter, who's 5, was talking about how she convinced me to grow my beard because I'm wrapped around her little finger. And she laughed as she explained that my sideburns are getting gray because he's 40, she said, with this impish grin and her little laugh, which always melts my heart. Meanwhile, my son, who at 10 is almost as tall as I am, snuggled into my arms. "I love you," he said. He does this multiple times a day. Yesterday, I jokingly got under his arm because I said, "This is what it's going to be like soon." He rolled his eyes, as he so often does these days. "Why do you have to be so dad-like?" But these moments of closeness are the best ones of my day. Having kids has been the most wonderful and beautiful and heartbreaking thing that has ever happened to me. And it makes the truth about the world so much harder to bear. Friends, it's been 2 years since October 7th, a time of desperation and death, amongst so many moments of desperation and death, stretching back generations. An attack that, of course, was devastating, but that was retaliated for 100-fold through bombing and attacks, and through cutting off water and humanitarian aid, and through taking land and ordering people out of their homes. And so when I tell you these stories about my children, I imagine the Palestinian children who live in what is considered by UNICEF to be the most dangerous place in the world for children. I can't help but imagine what it would be like if I lived there with my children. And it makes it really hard to think about and to talk about. But this morning we're going to talk about it because here we can do hard things and talk about hard things. That's part of what church is for, helping us to respond and process the moment. I had a professor in seminary who said, "We do theology with the Bible in one hand and the newspaper in the other." And while the Bible isn't our main source of wisdom, the sentiment still stands. And we can't afford to look away. Not when we have shared values that remind us that we are interdependent with all who inhabit this planet. Not when we believe that all beings are sacred, diverse in culture, experience, and theology. And so this morning, I'm going to let my heart go there, and I hope you'll join me. Save the Children, an international organization dedicated to helping protect vulnerable children, estimates that about 2% of the children in Gaza have been killed, with many more injured and permanently disabled, and thousands more have lost their parents. This kind of trauma is undeniable, and I still can't help but think of my own children. Which is not to say that you have to have children to understand what's going on, any more than you have to have daughters to understand sexism. There are things we should be able to understand as humans. As Martin Luther King Jr. said, there are some things to which we ought to be maladjusted. As Unitarian Universalists who believe that every person is inherently worthy, with the right to flourish with dignity, love, and compassion, we have to know what it is and see it. But I say this because for me, having kids has made it hurt so much more. Back in 2023, when I felt like maybe we could turn the tide, I was part of a group of clergy who met with Representative Catherine Clark and her staff. Actually, just her staff, not her. She's a member of the House of Representatives for our district here and the minority whip, which basically means she was close to President Biden, and she would not call for a ceasefire or to stop sending weapons to Israel. And the thing about this that really got to me, really bothered me, is that she was constantly presenting herself as a defender of women and children. But as we sat in her office, there was a picture of children's handprints in paint behind her desk. And I couldn't bring myself to understand. But that, of course, is what her staffers told me. You don't understand the complexities. And sure, maybe I don't. I mean, I definitely don't. But do I have to be a scholar to understand that killing that many people is wrong? So yes, I am no expert. But the UN reports that on average 100 people are killed in Gaza every day. I am no expert, but on Wednesday, Israel ordered everyone to leave Gaza City, and that everyone who stayed would be considered a militant supporter of Hamas and treated as such. I am no expert, but this week 500 people on flotillas trying to bring humanitarian aid to Gaza were stopped and arrested because they were trying to bring attention to what happened. I am no expert, but the UN says there is a genocide in Gaza, and so does the International Court of Justice and Amnesty International and the International Association of Genocide Scholars. I am no expert, but the definition of genocide is targeting a group with the intent to destroy the group in whole or in part. I'm no expert, but the President of the United States proposed making Gaza into a resort town. I am no expert, but Palestinians have been bombed overnight in Gaza. I heard this on NPR this morning. Friends, we can't all be experts, but that doesn't mean we can't speak out. The conflict between the Palestinian people and the Israelis, of course, didn't start on October 7th. The Palestinians have been living under occupation and apartheid since long before Hamas's deadly attack. This doesn't end when the bombs stop falling, but first the bombs have to stop falling. The people cannot be subjected to this. It's a moral injury to us all. Like I said, I'm no expert, but I do know something about trauma and its impacts on children. Everyone in that region, Palestinians and Israelis alike, are going to be suffering from the trauma and PTSD of what is happening. And that's a recipe for continued war and conflict, because trauma makes you see everything as a threat. So what happens to a people who've been constantly losing their land, who've grown up under this threat? Generational trauma has impacted everyone in this region, and it makes it hard to end. Thanks to some folks in this community, I was recently recommended the movie 5 Broken Cameras, and I watched it. And it's made by a Palestinian man who's living in the West Bank from 2005 on. And in this man's village, olive groves are bulldozed to make a barrier to build settlements for Israelis. This man tries to document what's happening in his community, but his cameras keep getting broken by the Israeli army. Now, what struck me most when I was watching this was the impact this was having on children in the community. One day, the man who's making the movie brings his child with him to a demonstration, and the child witnesses what's happening. I was struck by a conversation afterwards that this child, younger than my son, is having with his mother. He says, "The soldiers come and started shooting. They were everywhere, but I wasn't afraid. They were in front of Daddy's car." The mother says, "And you weren't afraid? Weren't you afraid they'd take you? Weren't you afraid, Gabriel?" And finally, as he looks down, he says, "Yes, I was." And here's the thing. As I was watching this movie, I couldn't stop thinking about what's happening here. Obviously, it's different, but there are children here who are afraid of getting removed or separated from their parents or losing their homes, of military being unleashed on citizens. And I thought to myself, well, of course, if this is what we're willing to support, of course. Because this is what makes this different in some way from the other genocides that are happening in the world right now. We are funding it. Of course, there are others, Sudan being the one that comes most immediately to mind, and Myanmar. And we are not absolved from recognizing them. But this one, in Palestine, we are in part responsible for, and we have a duty to stop it. You might be wondering what you can do. And Reverend Ralph, one of our community ministers who couldn't be here today, could put together a flyer, which I believe is over, as you can look at it when you go away, when you leave. It has some information about calling your representatives and attending rallies, including one tomorrow, and clearly stating what is happening is a genocide. It is the job of those of faith to speak out on these issues. In fact, it's a moral injury that we are part of this. What our country is doing and helping to do, it hurts us at our very core. Moral injury is when we do something or we witness someone doing something on our behalf, something that violates our own conscience or values. It's observed in veterans, and it causes a deep sense of negative emotions. According to the Center for Moral Injury, military members experience ongoing negative moral emotions such as shame, guilt, anger, contempt, and disgust after serving in combative environments. Theologians Rita Nakashima Brock and Gabrielle Latenti talk of moral injury as a soul in anguish. And I believe that as a country, we might be experiencing collective moral injury in our witness to so many things that are against what we deem to be our values and conscience. And when I think about what's happening, my own soul is in anguish. I have been a part of this, ever so small. We all have. And so the least I can do is witness it. At the Unitarian Universalist General Assembly in June of 2024, an action of immediate witness was passed, titled Solidarity with Palestinians, and it invited the following: witnessing, call for the liberation of Palestine and the end of apartheid, declare our moral outrage and shared horror at Israel's massacres, mass incarceration, torture, destruction of the land, and poisoning soil for future generations, and decimation of systems of care that support life in the region. Call for an immediate permanent ceasefire, massive humanitarian aid, the release of all captives, and an end to genocide around the world. Educating, hold teach-ins about Palestine and Israel that includes sacred spaces for spiritual processing. Organizing and advocating, engage with Palestinian-led groups and coalitions supporting liberation. Sign, amplify, and carry out the Apartheid-Free Communities Pledge. Support boycott, divestment, and sanctions against Israel and corporate enablers, and end U.S. military aid to Israel until it ceases its policies and practices of apartheid, military occupation, settler colonialism, and genocide. Protect the freedom and safety of solidarity activists by supporting protests and opposing legislation and policies that restrict First Amendment rights. Perhaps it is time for us to engage. This month, our theme is Stories of the Dead. And we, of course, invite you to bring stories of your beloved dead. One of our community members bought a kufiyya that we have placed on our altar in recognition of the tens of thousands who have been killed in Palestine. And when I think of them, I imagine all the stories we aren't hearing. Each of these people who have died, both Palestinian and Israeli alike, had their stories. Little ones about their children, like the ones I shared at the beginning of my own. Let this represent the stories we haven't heard of these Palestinians and Israelis. The human ones that represent love and joy and peace, may their memories live on. Because we as Unitarian Universalists need to witness and cannot be silent in the face of this. May Palestine one day be free of genocide and occupation, and may it be so. Blessed be. And let us say together, Amen. Amen.